Sorry, I missed part of it while I was eating my food. So that's just from the more common keys being in the home
Yes.
space?
So, and so when you had said Faraday cage, I was thinking, well, on my machine, I have it so that you can't get past this screen without typing my password, and so it comes to the black screen with simply a login dialog, and on my keyboard it says AOEUIDHTNS, and so these are the most typed letters in the English language, and the punctuation that you use the most are right above your strongest and longest fingers, and then the ones that you don't type very often, like Z, is way over here in the corner, and a semicolon, and Q, J, V, and they're not nearly as convenient.
And cap locks and shift next to each other.
What's that?
It's cap locks and shift next to each other.
Yeah, and so you can remap your keyboard to whatever type. Now Colmac is not by default supported on Mac OS X. Dvorak does ship with the system, but if somebody were to watch my fingers while I type, unless they're familiar with the Dvorak layout, they're not even going to know which letters I type.
That is an interesting point, though. I mean, someone who's been trained on the Dvorak or the QWERTY keyboard all their lives, what kind of a learning curve is it to adjust over to?
So I switched over in about 1995, 96, and I've been typing on Dvorak ever since. And I've known people that have switched, and then because they had to share the computer with other people, they had to switch back because the other people in the household didn't know how to type or wouldn't type.
Well, right. Of course,
and
that's another complicating factor. But
so for me, it took me about 6 weeks of typing like a complete moron. Of like, wow, this is I learned on QWERTY. I was able to type 45 words per minute on QWERTY, and I took typing classes in high school. And then I was like, I want to see, I won't ask anyone to do anything that I haven't personally done myself. And so I have not typed on a Colmac keyboard, I'll say that. But I learned how to type on Dvorak, and it took me about a month to, and I mean like, it was pretty painful.
By the end of the month, or at most by the end of 6 weeks, you were.
I can type about 75 words per minute now on Dvorak, and I can swap back to QWERTY if I need to. It is not as easy, especially if it's the same keyboard that I'm typing on. But if I go to like an IBM 101 keyboard with all the clicky ones, like I can type on QWERTY on that easy because it doesn't have the finger memory of my Dvorak keyboard. It feels different. I have a different feeling about it.
You do feel like you're typing faster then?
What's that?
You do feel like you're typing faster? Because
I've benched myself typing faster.
There are a lot of reports that it's just an urban legend.
It's something to try. I mean, as far as like empirical evidence, I think the finger travel thing will tell you one thing. And the fastest typist in the world, according to Guinness or whatever, is a Dvorak typist. So it's a personal choice. But as far as like the privacy and somebody looking over your shoulder stuff, they're not going to be able to see where my fingers went because the majority of people will not know where the placement of the keys are. So.
Yeah, but if you're looking at emanations, it's just security by obscurity.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is. I mean, if somebody's really interested in finding out your information. So another thing I should mention, this book, How to Be Invisible, is a fantastic book. The guy who wrote it, he has a couple rules about how to keep your information out of public records and the hands of like private investigators and things like that. So as a former private investigator, he goes through and talks about how a private investigator would go and search for a person, registry of deeds, banking records, go to your dentist and ask, where does this guy live? And they will tell you. They're not supposed to tell you, but if you come up with a good story, her son was in an accident, I need to find her right away, almost anyone will give that information out. And so the first thing that he says is never let your name be associated with your physical address ever. Get a P.O. box, have your mail delivered to a friend's house, have it delivered in a different name. And he goes through step by step how you can hide your information from people that might be looking, if you're Brad Pitt and they want to find out where your vacation home is, how can you hide your assets? He has a story of Mary Kay Letourneau, and she was out in, having relations with the 16-year-old boy that was in her class, and she was specifically barred from having any contact with him. But she was parked on the side of the road, and the cop came along and looked and said, I'm going to run the plate just to see if the car is stolen. It's parked in a fairly odd place, and then it came back with the name Mary Kay Letourneau, and he's like, oh, I've heard that name. That's been in the news. Let me go investigate further. But if it had been in the name of, a friend, or if it had been in the name of a, if the name had been in the name of a trust or an LLC, then she wouldn't have gotten busted again. And not that she was doing something inappropriate in the first place, but he uses that as an example of how somebody could come across your information and use it in a way that would negatively affect you. The one part of this book that is fairly weak is the computing section. He's an older man, and he doesn't really. He talks about personal computers and then email and the internet. So
pretty much not secure. He's kind of
yeah, he's not.
Wow.
Yeah, he's like, get an antivirus program that'll protect. He's like, no, that's not.
He pretty much says though. He's just like saying, assume your email's not secure.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of
So I would say take what I've talked about plus what he has in here, do more research, and because the information that he provides in here would not stop somebody like me. The information that I've talked about, I don't know, even if you went to somebody at Apple, how they could get at your data if it was encrypted under PGP whole disk encryption or TrueCrypt, or both, or multiple levels of encryption. But this is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. Where he talks about LLCs, I have, because it was something that interested me, rather than going and paying for an LLC, and as I understand it, it's about $100 a year, and you pay that to the state. I'm not interested in giving the state any more money.
What about a foreign one?
Well, you could.
Does he have any information about that?
The suggestion that he has in here has to do with New Mexico LLCs, because they do not need to have a board of directors registered or or provide any reports.
He doesn't have anything about anything that's actually outside of.
If you were to have something that's outside the country, I don't know that you could use it as an entity to own assets inside the country.
Yes, you can.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something.
You would have to declare all this stuff on a separate.
You would have to declare certain things, and depending on what you're doing, an LLC might not be the right vehicle for what you want to do. But what I had done is that once I realized that there would be an ongoing charge to do an LLC, that was not something that I was interested in doing, especially supporting the state in that way. And so I started researching trusts. And in New Hampshire, you have a trust written up by an attorney or somebody who had reviewed the trust to make sure that it complies with New Hampshire law. And the trust does not need to be registered with the state. It exists simply by writing it up, having it notarized, having a list of trustees and beneficiaries with the trust, but that trust document stays private. You do not need to give it to anyone in order to use it as a vehicle to own assets. And when you buy land, the Registry of Deeds gets the name of the trust. So it could be, realty company conveys to ABC Trust of P.O. Box whatever, and no trustee name, nobody's name in it. And you can change beneficiaries or the trustees at any time. So where he talks about LLCs, I'm an advocate of trusts, because you don't need to pay an ongoing fee with the state. They can be perpetual, and they don't need to expire. And anyone that has questions about how to set up a trust, I'm willing to talk to them about it. I have a great attorney to recommend. He's a Free Stater, and he will set you up. And
Adam?
That's Adam Mackler, macklerlaw.com, and he's already done all of the research for us, so it may be, hopefully, significantly less for him to set up a trust for somebody else, because that research has been done.
Doesn't the federal government still, or at least the IRS still have purview of what goes on in the trust?
If you were doing something where the federal government is interested in whatever you're doing, you're not going to hide it. But
Yeah.
the trust itself does not get registered with any governmental entity.
Well, I'm thinking that when you do a sale of real property,
Yep.
that automatically gets filed with the IRS.
It very well may. Yeah,
Yeah,
I wouldn't say
it
that
does
using a
happen.
trust will be a way to hide any sort of like tax liability.
It's not.
And I would not condone any type of illegal activities.
Oh,
What
no,
what
of
is
course
the-
not.
So what specifically is the purpose of the trust?
The purpose
yourself from other
is-
people trying to find information.
Oh,
Yeah, so if somebody is searching the registry of deeds for your last name, it's
Right.
easy to go in there, it's a public document, and see who owns this piece of land.
okay.
And just as like a simple like looking around, I was able to find out, even though it wasn't in this person's name, I was able to associate this trust or this LLC was associated with this person because I was able to match up certain
Right.
information
Whereas
between.
with the trust, there's no way to.
Well, if you
I
don't
mean,
use.
yeah, no way. There's always a way. Like you said, always someone
But
who's
what
really
he advocates in this
certain
book
can find.
is make it more difficult because they may run out of money trying to track you down before they find you.
Now, what
if
if
it's-
what if you own a trust that owns a foreign registered LLC that owns all your assets?
You could do that, and generally the way that people use trusts is to avoid probate.
Yeah. it's very
Because
successful.
when you have a will and you deed this information, this land to your son, it will still go in front of a probate judge, and it may be 6 months before that probate process ends, and he gets access to that land. And so by putting it in a trust and making him a beneficiary, it automatically transfers to whoever is the next beneficiary or the schedule of beneficiaries that goes with the trust. To look up trusts, look up how to avoid probate, because those are like the good examples of what people use them for today. And then if you were to look at it from a privacy perspective, this is a good resource. And as far as how to do it in a community way, there are community land trusts that we talked about this morning.
Well, now you said he focuses on LLCs.
He does.
But he does also have information about trusts as well.
If he did, I've only read it. I read it like maybe 6 months ago, so it's been a while. But he really focuses on LLCs and specifically New Mexico LLCs, and he explains why in there. And he has an entire process as you send your request to somebody in Alaska who sends it to the agent in New Mexico, registers it with the state, and then bounces it back through Spain, and then comes back to you. So you can't find out. Nobody knows who went and did any of these things. And so if you really are paranoid or you have something to hide, that may be a way of doing it. But I would not put any trust in like the idea that if the federal government or the state government with an unlimited amount of your money to track you down will not be able to do it. Like as far as like private creditors, it's possibly a good solution depending on your situation.
Yeah, there's also some information that some of the offshore agents are pretty well connected with the feds.
Yeah, there's possible that this guy's a federal agent, and who knows? And you're just giving it to them. I have no idea.
I actually read a couple of his other digital books.
Yep.
And he gives consulting out. I seriously doubt he's a federal agent.
I'm sure he's not.
No,
yeah,
but
I
some
mean,
of them are, so
No,
you
no,
have to
it's
be pretty
just
careful.
but
But it could be that you're a federal agent, and you.
and you're a disinformation agent, and you're just here just to try to sidetrack us.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I guess it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah.